Bruce,
Here.
Erdman Hermans. Here. Harp.
Here.
Monroe.
Here.
Summers. Here. And Mayor Kuhn is present.
Thank you so much. Next is the approval of minutes. Is there any updates or changes to the Plan Commission minutes of January 23rd?
I have no changes, but I would like to say I really like the streamlined minutes, and I hope that saves a little time for the staff. And I hope at our next meeting, maybe we could talk more, Mayor, about the meeting you had with the chairs and vice chairs of committees and some of the points that were raised there and streamlining our own work.
I would love that. If we could add that to the next agenda.
Will
That
do.
would be great. Thank you so much. Hearing no other changes, I'm going to go ahead and approve I'm going to accept the meeting minutes. And I'm just looking at, next item is the agenda items. Number 1, the extraterritorial certified survey map for the Zieglers at 5031 Church Road. And I appreciate the showing. Can you show on the map about where that's at?
It's the blue box. I decided to put these in there to help you understand where this is. So it's about a mile, just over a mile north of the airport, just south of Ashton Corners.
Thank you so much. And I want to make a comment that we appreciate our neighbors to the north in the town of Springfield and always want to be a good neighbor. So I appreciate that this is in front of us. Is there a motion?
Commissioner Bruce will make a motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Adams will second.
Any comments?
Just a question with the motion to approve, is that as recommended in the staff recommendation?
Yeah,
Or is that-
yes, it is.
Okay.
Thank you.
So the recommendation in the staff memo is to approve the extraterritorial CSM as submitted, contingent on the addition of a note on the CSM indicating an airport and a quarry are located approximately 1 mile from the property, correct?
And all those in favor of approving the extraterritorial certified survey map, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously. Moving on to item number 2, design review, Pleasant View Storage, 2010 Pleasant View Road. Is there a motion?
I would like to make a motion, but I have a question for staff first. Daphne, your follow-up message tells me that item number 2 can be struck.
Yes, so that has been,
Thank you.
that has been satisfied. I just had missed the landscaping plan because it was at the very end. So that satisfies all of the landscaping plan requirements. So it's just contingencies 1 and 3 in the staff recommendation.
Do we need to address or make any comments regarding the shared driveway access that's still being pursued?
Yes, and I believe the applicant Jessie is on the Zoom, and she might be able to address those questions. I believe they are not going with that shared access because this is stormwater that will kind of be, in the middle of the path, but I think they can clarify. And Brian,
Oh, sure. Yeah.
he's also with
If you could come to the microphone.
Yeah.
Actually, I would go to
That one.
the podium. Thank you for that.
What's your last name?
Beaulieu. It's Beaulieu.
And for the public, can you just say your name and the company you're with?
Sure. Yeah. So Brian Beaulieu with Burse Surveying and Engineering. And so we did the civil design, the stormwater. And I think part of the reason for the driveway kind of going there is there aren't any existing easements granting automatic permission to use that driveway. And I believe there have been communications between the two parties, but they're not close enough to a agreement that wanted to move forward with a different driveway location at this time. I think there was a note that, I mean, if those, negotiations work out, one way or the other, then maybe it would come back for another round of review. But I think at this point, looking at this driveway location.
Does that satisfy your questions? Okay, great. And I did appreciate your emails and comments, Commissioner Bruce. I don't know if anyone else had them, but I saw you had a couple comments on this, so thank you for that. Now, did we have a motion on this one?
Before making a motion, I think, I don't want to make a motion that says, it's,
With the number 2 item.
well, with the determination of sidewalk need at this location. I think we need to determine whether the plan commission wants to make that a, one of the contingencies, what we actually think should be done with the sidewalk.
Number 3.
Yep. So could we talk about the sidewalk first and go to C-103? Or maybe maybe what you're showing there.
Yeah, the comment is basically just on the site plan. So sometimes when this will be a new driveway apron, and so when that is built out, sometimes the engineers will require, oops, sorry, it's taking a little bit to load. But they'll basically just require that a sidewalk be built, right where this driveway apron is. So it's kind of like spec'd, and so it'll still function exactly the same way as a regular driveway. It'll just kind of have that level area as a sidewalk so that if sidewalks are ever put in anywhere along the street in the future, that it will, match up with everything else around it. So
Just
that's
to there.
determination that Public Works would like to see from Plan Commission.
I think that's very reasonable.
I agree. Why not make provisions for it for the future?
Okay, so I will I'll move that we that we approve the design for Pleasant View Storage 2010 Pleasant View Road contingent upon 2 things: resolution of engineering staff comments is the first, and the second is inclusion of a sidewalk into the driveway. Or in the driveway.
Yeah, just along the driveway apron.
Is there a second?
Summers will second.
Any comments? Hearing none. All those in favor of approving the design review of Pleasant View Storage 2010 Pleasant View Road, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
And just to clarify, this is not, the sidewalks only as part of the driveway apron and not along the rest of the front.
Right.
Is that?
That is
I'll put
accurate.
that note in.
Yes.
All right. Moving on to design review Lakeview Village Apartments, solar canopy 6223 Maywood Avenue.
Oh, that was quick.
I'm
I'll
guessing
pause it.
part of number 3.
And
Okay.
just got approved.
Will you please mute your, thank you. Staff, can you give a little summary on this?
Sure, yeah. So this project is part of Kelly Hilliard, our sustainability coordinators, it's the Energy Efficiency Navigator program. And so that program is all about updating a lot of our utilities and, the building envelopes for a lot of older housing in Middleton, just to lower a lot of utility bills. And so this project has kind of found 2 areas that they could put in solar canopies to help lower utility bills for, I believe it's the residents of, this townhouse towards the south here. And so they would like approval for both locations just because right now they still haven't been able to determine which one would work best for their project. The first option is the one that they prefer, and that's just because it is a larger array. And so that would be, more energy that they could provide for the residents. And then, however, this option, they will have to, I believe, remove a large mature tree. And they still aren't really sure what kind of tree it is yet, but that's something that would have to be removed. And then in option 2, this solar canopy would go over existing, I believe it was 13 parking spots. It is a lot smaller and it is further from the units that they were hoping to utilize for it. So it is less desirable. However, it doesn't affect any impervious surface because it's going over existing impervious surface. Whereas option one, they were thinking of putting in a nice patio for the residents, which would be nice. However, they might have to, do a stormwater plan for that extra impervious surface.
Great, thank you for that, Marie. Is there any clarifying questions or is there a motion on this design review?
Before we go into the motions, obviously both of these are, appreciated projects, right? And the city's supporting them. Frankly, I liked option 2 better just because it gave cover to cars. It was like dual purpose. It was like a carport plus solar energy, and we didn't impact the impervious surface ratio anymore. So that one seemed to me like just a cleaner solution. But as I said before, I think both of them are great options.
I agree with my peer here, and I would not support removing a large mature tree unless it were a softwood tree that would be coming down some point in the future, like a cottonwood.
Okay.
And creating more impervious surface and removing a tree doesn't seem to be like a great cost benefit. Yeah.
I agree. I don't like, is the tree removal necessary to physically build this, or is it a problem with shade that it would create? It's in the way.
Yeah, I believe it's like right around here on the, if you could see where my arrow is. So it is kind of in the middle of where the array would be. And then, yes, it would cause shade issues because it's like 20 or 30 feet. And then this would just be about 10 to 15 feet high. So there would be shading
So they couldn't just move that array
like around the tree
to
or
where,
something.
well, to where the cars are parked. See where the cars are parked?
Yeah, right here.
Yeah, it looks like there would be space to put it, but I don't know, and maybe that tree would shade it.
I think the only thing I would add about your tree is in this part of the city, some of our trees were planted in the 50s and 60s. So some of them are not resistant to the flood waters that we've been having, and they're aging prematurely and dying off. So the only thing I would add is if it's near the end of its life or dying. But you're right, if it's a soft, I think you called it a softwood, is also reasonable. But I agree that the car port is a great idea.
Yeah.
And I'm open to either one. So I just appreciate that they're doing so.
Without knowing the health of the tree, it's hard to make an informed decision on this. I know I can support option 2. I don't know if I can support option 1.
It's fair. It's a fair. I shouldn't say that, but yeah, I felt the same way. So thank you for that. Is there a motion on supporting solar design reviews?
Well, I can make a motion to support option 2 and have the applicant explore option 2 further. And if that is not workable, to come back for approval of their option 1.
And before I make that comment, is there a second?
I'll second that.
And my comment would be if they do come back with option 1 for whatever reason, if they could give us some information on the tree,
Yeah.
whether it meets the softwood or the age, or just not a good thing for that very what used to be swampy area. So there's some tree preferences. So if it's not hitting those, oh, there's a picture.
Is there a problem with is that garbage?
Yeah, so that's a dumpster area. I believe now it has fencing around it. Yeah. So that area would, I believe also be underneath that solar canopy.
I think and don't know the details of how this project is unfolding, but are the tenants, recognizing that they're not the owners of the building, are the tenants involved at all? Because I wouldn't want to take down a tree without finding out how the residents of this building feel about that.
Yeah, I'm not sure if the tenants are involved. I believe they are working directly with the owner of the building. And they have a whole team that's been collaborating on that. But I'm not sure if they've reached out directly to the residents who live there.
It looks like that's the only tree on that entire side of the property. I would say if they want to take down that tree, that there should be some sort of landscaping plan to beautify that area as well.
Yeah, and they are planning on doing like a pergola situation. So, underneath the carport, they'll have like landscaping and like a patio area for the residents to enjoy.
All right, any other comments? I think these were really very good, robust discussion and very thoughtful. Thank you, everyone. All those in favor?
May I,
You
Mayor,
want to clarify?
may I clarify the motion?
Mhm.
So the motion's to approve option 2 while indicating that the Plan Commission would be amenable to considering option 1 if there were additional information provided about the mature tree that would be removed. Is that the intent?
All those in favor of approving the design review as noted, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Number 4 is a concept review of the 6300 mixed use, 6300 University Avenue. And someone from the team is in the audience. If there are any clarifying questions, staff, can you provide a short summary?
Sure. So the main point of this concept is to determine the building length of their proposed building, because in the new proposed zoning code, we do have a limitation of 250 feet for building facade length. And so they've come up with a way to kind of counteract, that, because overall the building would be, 400 or 500 feet in length, but they've designed it in a way that I think is thoughtful and kind of breaks up the building facade. And so they would like your feedback on that. They also noted in their letter of intent that it's kind of considered 2 buildings, so they would have a group development kind of conditional use permit along with the drive-through. And so they wanted your feedback on if you think that kind of concept would be able to be workable onto this site. Let me pull up the site plan. And then, yes, the team is here for any other questions or concerns.
I had a question about the sidewalk. So it looks like the sidewalk configuration is preserved from exactly the way it is now. Why is it the way it is now? Like, do we have a policy on what a sidewalk should do? Is it easier for people using wheelchairs to have a straight line?
Good question.
What's the purpose of the sidewalk being like that?
I'm not entirely sure.
It's topography. I think I
Yeah.
haven't been out at the site lately, but just from memory. And also there's extra right of way there. So they probably were pretty, because they had the room, they probably meandered the sidewalk to reflect the topography is my guess. Sean Stowski is actually on our call and we could ask him, our city engineer, if he's.
Excellent.
Might know.
Sean, you're on the spot. If you can unmute and help a lady out.
Yeah, I don't have a specific recollection, but I think too that there's topography, trees, poles, utilities, and to some degree this is meandering around largely because there was an opportunity to do that without having to move some of that stuff.
It strikes me too that that we did inherit on this part of university some unusual things because it was a county road for a long time or county highway. So because I think we had an issue where the coffee shop was across the street. So
Right.
that-
It's state right of way, and it used to be a county road after the state gave it up, and now it's a local road after the county gave it up. But yeah, it's still state-owned right of way.
yes, that's what I
So-
remember from the coffee shop. Sure.
So when I looked at the site here recently, the part of the site where the sidewalk is closest to the buildings, the middle of the site, is the highest point of the site. And then on either side, the site starts to drop off. So from the curb, the sidewalks actually on both ends of the site, the sidewalks actually below the level of the street, which is very unusual. Usually our sidewalks would be raised above the street. And that was one of the questions I guess for you, Sean, is will the city provide a sidewalk profile that's more consistent with current street level?
I think that's one of the things the design team actually reached out to us about, if we had a preferred alignment for that. But this early in the concept, I think we didn't get into that.
I appreciate that. That's a good, honest answer. Oh, I see the pole now. Thank you for showing that. The power line pole. But I'm glad that you guys are bringing this up because as we do good design and walkability in the city, these are the kinds of things that we want to make sure we're doing well, as we walk on our main arteries. And maybe Sean, it could be something we think about for the next rotation. And I do appreciate you being on this call, whether it's for this one or something else. As for the building, I was interested in that walkway. That was an interesting design feature for me with the two buildings. Understanding that with winter, why you would want that. I didn't know if the Plan Commission would feel that honored the ethos of the shorter buildings. Anyone has any thoughts?
Well, it appears like two smaller buildings to me. And the appearance of what the buildings are is what the decision is based on, right? So to me, it looks fine.
And if I recall correctly, it was maybe a 30-foot step back of the pedestrian bridge.
Yeah.
If you, yeah, can you say your name and the company you're with?
Yep. Connor Nett, and I'm with Ford Development Group. The between the buildings right now is 20 feet between them.
Okay.
And that's just based on partially due to trying to make a commercial space on the one building that works well. We're able to elevate that building slightly higher and make up that little bit of slope within that pedestrian walk by using a 20-foot gap. Also, it makes it easier if we were to look at clear spanning it rather than having columns and things like that. So those are all things that we're looking at. If it gets longer than that, it gets quite structurally large members that might be needed.
And so for the Plan Commission to know, I did know about this project about 1.5 years ago when I was still on council as an alder. And I think you guys have owned the land, or you've been working on this project for about that amount of time or thinking about it. That building that we were shown has been vacant for at least before the pandemic.
The building on site right now,
Mhm.
there are tenants on site right now, a few.
All right, but it is commercial.
Mhm.
It's a couple stories. When I was doing doors, I didn't ever hear concerns about development, like putting apartments or new commercial buildings around that part of the district. There might be concerns specifically nearby by the neighbors because that is their neighborhood. But I think you guys are going up 1 or 2 stories.
In this proposal, you're saying?
Yes.
It is 4 stories,
Yes, but it's currently 2. or
currently
3?
2 stories.
2
Yep.
stories. Okay.
Two,
So
two additional stories. Yeah.
they're used to some height on that part of university, and they're used because I think there's a building and parking lot there right now.
Yes, there is.
Okay.
And the building is on the high point of the site. It's an office building, so I'm assuming floor to floor, it's also taller than a typical 2-story building. So it would be 4 stories across most of the site.
And university on that side, because coming from Madison, we're starting to get some development. So it does flow. And I did see that in part of your proposal that there was a commercial space that currently vacant, a couple apartments down, and that was part of your concern. And I'm sorry I'm talking so much, but the reason is that's why you're asking for the drive-through. Is that?
But it's to make the drive-through adds marketability to the commercial space. It's not just, we used a couple examples in Middleton and the carry ad, although it just came on this year, so it's not a very long time frame. We're seeing in other locations, Verona, City of Madison, where we have projects, commercial space within mixed-use buildings is difficult to lease. And I kind of mentioned that in the narrative, but some of that comes to retailers. Although we want to create urban streets that have a good pedestrian presence, a lot of retailers still favor being able to see that parking spot or have a drive-through. And when Angus Young presented the first rendition of this concept plan, the way they had the covered parking on the ground level, it lended itself well to a drive-through. So we asked them to explore that option. And at this time, it seems like it could be a viable solution, which makes it a very marketable space. Typically on a project like this, you assume it's going to be vacant for several years versus if we were to say that, hey, we can market it as a drive-through, we could likely pre-lease that space. We feel pretty good about that. And one nice thing about the drive-through that we are showing is it doesn't wrap the building completely, so people don't have to cross lanes of traffic. It's through the parking lot, so you would be able to get to the front door of retail without it wrapping all the way around the building, which is a nice, I think it integrated into that underground, partially covered area quite well. So it's all about trying to make it a more marketable mixed-use space.
So both buildings, okay, they're both 4 stories, but in building A, the first floor is going to be parking.
It'll be retail space on the corner,
Okay.
and then it'll be a covered parking lot for the other
Okay.
portion of it.
All right.
And one comment that Commissioner Bruce made in the notes that were shared is screening, and we are looking at pulling that facade down in front of that, at least partially. Maybe there'll be some, say like window panels or something so you can see through into the parking, but trying to screen that so it's not just a wide open space, but still trying to create some visual connection likely.
And what is going to be north of building B?
North of building B in that space there. Right now that'll be a portion of the roof that will either, I'm thinking it'll probably a combination of some green roof elements as well as like a river stone rock type normal membrane roof. So some of it near the plaza will likely have a green roof element. The other will be more of your typical roof system of a building.
Okay, but that space where the hand cursor is right now on the screen, that's not all going to be paved, is it?
It would not be concrete, no.
Good.
But it's all hard surface.
It would be a hard surface, right? There would be balconies for units on that level. We're still looking at ways to how to make that visually appealing because you do have 4 stories of multifamily looking down onto it. I think some sort of combination of green roof and a membrane roof is the way it'll likely go, and try to do that in an artistic way.
And that makes me ask, why limited to 4 stories when 5 would be allowed in this district?
A lot of that has to do with underground parking. So we wouldn't be able to park the site with one stall per unit without doing a more intensive underground parking system, 2 layers of underground parking. Whereas with one underground layer, you're able to do the parking that you would need to service the 4 stories. So the extra construction cost of more parking underground just to add a 5th floor, it doesn't really work out at this time.
Okay, and then these will be market rate.
That's the plan.
Okay.
Yep.
But there are no 3 bedrooms.
No 3 bedroom planned, and it's largely looking at recent construction in Middleton. A lot of it is ones and studios and 2 bedrooms. I've seen fewer 3 bedrooms, and a lot of that has to do with just the cost of 3 bedrooms being so high. So typically what we try to do in particular, like inside corners of building are a good space to do a 2 bedroom plus den. So you're getting that extra space if you have, say, a larger family, but yet you're not having the entire space needed for a 3 bedroom. So those 2 bedroom dens tend to do pretty well.
Okay.
I appreciate your response regarding the screening of the parking. And I think, overall, I think this is a well thought out development. Commissioner Hanero did bring up a good point regarding the first floor over the parking on the building B end. That if that's just rock and concrete would be pretty oppressive. And but there are some great opportunities there to do some green roof and some landscape elements and to try to create something there that's usable. That bridge connection, I don't know that that's going to get much visibility. People will really notice that once they're driving down, because you're really would have to really look for it as you're driving across. It would be nice if that had as much glass as possible to make that feel as light as a connection as possible. But I think it's a pretty well thought out solution to the site.
Any other comments? Do we have a motion?
I had one question
Please,
first.
go ahead.
Can you talk about what sustainability related features you might incorporate into the building, such as solar?
Yeah. I think that could also be a thing to look at on that area of B on the back. Well, it is the north side of the building, maybe not. Green roofs have been the main one that we've been talking about so far. Typically, we try to apply for PACE financing for a project like that, which would mean we need to use high efficiency appliances, meet all the energy requirements that would be associated with the PACE grant. So a lot of it comes down to how the building is constructed, the windows you use, the HVAC systems. But I think we have an opportunity we need to look at on the backside of B there with green roofs. Maybe solar, but like I said, it's probably on the north side, might not work there.
Well, I was thinking solar on the roof itself.
Of the other
Given
roof
that,
could
there
potentially
would
work
be
too.
no trees blocking,
Yep.
shading your
Mhm.
solar array.
Is there a motion?
Do we need a motion on a concept review?
No motion.
My apologies.
I mean, it's not unprecedented to have one, but it certainly isn't required. You're just giving feedback.
All right.
That's lately, I think that's been more standard, just to give feedback.
Is that helpful then for you?
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, I think that was helpful feedback. So, yep.
I would just add, if a motion is made for concept approval, it's not binding on future approvals. So
And Mark, can you just kind of clarify what's required moving forward in terms of the drive-through? Is that a separate conditional use?
Yeah, so if the proposed zoning moves forward through council and all of that, that would be a second, or that would require that conditional use permit for the MUA district.
So I think I've made, at least from my perspective, the drive-through seems very well done here and I'm comfortable with it. I just want to make sure that the other commissioners have weighed in on that because that'll be something that's important to the applicant moving forward.
Yeah, on that note, yes, if there's negative feedback, that's helpful too. So
I support it with the amount of Uber and different delivery services. It seems like flow is really important in new construction. And especially with the smaller parking lots, having the ability to move cars in a circle and in and out and pick things up and just keep moving seems like a really good plan. And I would support more of this type of building in the future.
Planning commission meeting. Okay.
Especially since the pedestrians don't need to cross the driveways to
Mhm.
access the sidewalks. That's what I was looking at there.
It's well done.
My only thought, and it's not that I'm animus to it, I actually like the idea, but my only thought was if the retail needs to have it, then is this the time where we say, do we need to have retail? I know that we want them on corners. But is it, we would rather have this kind of good design and have a drive-through? Or would we rather say, is there an exception to the retail? Does that make sense? Because
Following.
in Madison, we have so many vacant, commercial properties in their apartment buildings. If you're at the concept level, I think this is a really good design idea. But if we as a city are saying we really want walkability, we want to encourage people to bike and walk, is it that we want retail that it has both those options? Is that more important? Or is it okay for this location saying, looking at everything going on right now, we're okay with not having retail in this site? And that might be, you might actually want the retail for your folks. And in that case, I would like that feedback as well. But I say that because across the street, we have, I want to say like 12 shops. And then there's a coffee shop, there's a Napa store. You have a lot of commercial right in that strip, and it's healthy, which I'm glad about. In Madison, which really is only a half a mile away, we have some apartment buildings that are further down, that the commercial is empty. So you are saying you think you could sign a lease
yeah, right.
if you have this good design.
A drive-through would definitely help. Yep. If the question was, would we design it with the mixed use element? If it wasn't something that was required, we would try not to because it's so difficult to lease it. But that's a larger discussion for you guys, right? Because of the zoning, we have to incorporate it. So when we had this opportunity to add the drive-through, it's like this could really help that space. Whereas usually it's like, all right, it's something that doesn't when you go to get financing, it's essentially written off from the bank's perspective. They don't, look at that's nice that you have that. We're just going to put that on the shelf. So we would, if that wasn't a requirement, we wouldn't pursue it. No, but this drive-through element does help a lot.
So that's helping mitigate the issue.
It does. Yes, it does help.
Because I want to make sure that we are building apartments with commercial space that will be utilized. Like I really, and I know the rest of the commissioners feel the same way. It is not that I'm alone in the room on this. We don't want vacant commercial space up and down University. So just thank you for your honest feedback.
Yeah.
I think our zoning code does a pretty good job actually of kind of allowing for mixed use, but not requiring too much. We're only asking for it at the corners. They've done a nice job of that here. And I think they've they, this particular corner, I think will do quite well with some retail.
And I did think the language that was added in November, or early December, where it was a percentage of the ground floor up to the, was it 33% or 3,300 square feet? That it's recognizing that there is an issue, so that was helpful rather than just assuming, okay, the whole ground floor, that's a lot of space.
What also really helps in this case is the size of the lot, the dimensions of the lot give you more flexibility to work with the space. So it seemed like a good way to
Mhm.
incorporate a drive-through that is much better screened than other drive-throughs in the
Right.
city. This will be the best designed drive-through in the city.
Mhm.
Cool.
And I do like that it's located, I think that's Gateway. I think you'll have a lot of people that live in those, there's a lot of single family homes back there, that it's really walkable,
Mhm.
and a lot of apartments. So there is a lot of people that live on that side. It is hard to cross the street. So if you even have a like business, you
Mhm.
will get a lot of foot traffic.
Sure.
So, all right, any other comments? Hearing none. Moving on to number 5, Parmenter Street Reconstruction, Real Estate Acquisition Update and Design Preference. Staff, I know that this was talked about at Public Works last night. So
Yeah,
can you help me understand what they were talking about as well?
Sure, and Alder Haniro serves on both the Public Works Committee and the Ped Bike Transit Committee, which has also taken this up. And so were you planning on making any remarks? Otherwise, Sean and I.
Third time's the charm, right? I get to vote on this again. So the Ped Bike and Transit Committee considered this first on Thursday. And well, if you'll scroll down into the memo. So the options, I wanted to see the 6 options. There were 6 options presented for us to consider, and nobody wanted to terminate the project. Nobody on Ped Bike and Transit wanted to forego the sidewalk and the bike path. We didn't want to interrupt, break the bike path or the bike lanes or anything. And we felt, because of our city's complete streets policy, it's not acceptable to do option 3, which is just resurface Parmenter and not put in sidewalks and the bike lane. So we opted for items 4 and 5, meaning we were content with going to a redesign if it becomes necessary, and even suggested that the redesign should consider taking it down from the 2 lanes of traffic, or 2 lanes of travel each way, to more of a road diet with a center turn lane and just 1 lane north and 1 lane south. And we recognize that because of the existing delays, no matter what happens, it's likely that this will have to be deferred until 2025. So our preference was, if we had to, if the choice was scrap the project or do one of these other options, we thought redesigning it to be a smaller, either to not have a median at all or to have a smaller median. That was preferred. Last night at the Public Works meeting, we picked up on what Ped Bike and Transit said, and gave July 1 as the date by which we want a decision to be made as to whether or not we're going to be able to negotiate to get to acquire the land that we need to put in the existing design with the large median to accommodate future travel lanes. So I would say that Public Works, in essence, supported what Ped Bike and Transit recommended, pursuing a redesign if it becomes necessary, and recognizing it's going to likely be deferred until 2025. We just put the date of July 1st as the cutoff when a decision needs to be made to switch to the redesign. And that was based on MSA's estimate for how long it would take for them to do the redesign and still give us time to put it out for bid, so it could be constructed in 25.
And if I may just add to that summary from Alder Haniro, the motion that was adopted by the Public Works Committee, I think, as she said, is compatible with the Ped Bike Transit Committee recommendation. And I think Daphne has the motion available to display from last night. And Sean Stowski is available too if there are any technical questions that we can answer.
Can I just ask how many property owners are the city's having difficulty with in terms of getting this, the right of way?
We don't have a firm, we don't know exactly the status of all the negotiations other than that we don't have agreements with about half a dozen. Sean, is that about right?
Yeah, I think it's in that ballpark, where it's about half a dozen that we haven't really come to terms with yet.
Can I ask, as a follow-up, is how much of that land are you asking for? Is it like 5 feet, 10 feet?
It varies. There are only a few properties where we're looking for actual right-of-way. Most of it is permanent easement and a lot of temporary easement. The permanent easement tends to be little boxes where we need to put a yard inlet, on the backside of the right-of-way out in someone's yard to pick up low spots for drainage, because we won't have a ditch anymore. But most of it is just blending of grades and or trying to mesh in to a retaining wall where we have to go vertical at an edge. So a lot of it's temporary grading permissions.
Thank you for that.
And what if we go this option where we eliminate or minimize the median? If traffic lanes need to be expanded in the future, additional right of way would be taken then, but is that my understanding?
Yeah, this doesn't really preserve any easy flexibility that way, so it would become a pretty significant project in the future if we determined we needed additional lane capacity. From what we're looking at right now, it doesn't seem likely that we'll need that for quite a long time, if at all. But it would be much more difficult later.
This is only the section north of Century Avenue, is that correct?
Right. Yep, that's correct.
The traffic volumes along this stretch are roughly 5,000 vehicles a day, maybe a little less. And having one travel lane in each direction, there's plenty of room for capacity growth, if you will. There is a federal guideline of up to 25,000 cars, which is probably a little bit on the high side. But in terms of what a 2-lane road can handle, 2-lane meaning 1 lane in each direction. But since we're only at 5,000 now, and given that Bellefontaine Boulevard to the north is only being designed as a 2-lane road, the odds of needing 2 lanes in each direction for a 4-lane road, I think, are pretty slim, and also doesn't reflect the way the community aspires to grow, as evidenced in as documented in our comprehensive plan, and our emphasis on ped bike accommodations and transit.
Does the narrowing of the lanes impact the semi-trucks that access Springs Window Fashions in any way?
There's designed to be a pretty wide median break at the driveway, so they should be able to turn, through the median comfortably. If the median were eliminated, effectively turning would back up traffic.
So what is required of this committee this evening?
Mostly we're just looking for, what would be the best plan B option if we can't get plan A to work. And it really stems from, the city's lack, at least for now, of condemnation authority, because there are bike and pedestrian accommodations with the design. So it's just a matter of, if we can't get this figured out with remaining property owners, what should we do? And that's why there was such a such a range of options presented.
In reading the Public Works motion from last night, does that seem reasonable to people on our plan commission? The reason I say is, boy, I like a road diet. I love my bike lanes. I love my walking things. And I think it was 4. Was it 4 that was all the things? Yeah, see, there you go. That makes me happy. Sorry, Sean. I know the paving methodology. You guys love your pavement, so I'm just throwing some trees in there. It makes me happy.
Well,
But
it's a matter of median grass for now, but even that would narrow a 90-foot right-of-way to about a 70-foot right-of-way. So we would still need some acquisitions and easements, but at least it would make them smaller and maybe easier to negotiate. I'm not sure,
that's a
but
fair.
I think it's a viable plan B.
I could support making Plan A be the redesign, and because I am concerned. I mean, when have we ever met schedules? And that's
Well, it might take longer
not a
to jump
criticism.
ship now.
What, Sean?
It might take longer to jump ship now and start a redesign if we don't have to, because we'd be doing a lot of stuff over and renegotiating all of the properties and going back to WISDOT to try to get concurrence on a modified state municipal agreement. So that might be a bigger investment now in both time and money.
I would say, yeah, I mean, I would say we should be having a conversation with WISDOT now to find out what our options would be, because, well,
Or is that this one?
yeah, what I'm suggesting is that we could, I think the Ped Bike and Transit Committee, if given the chance to discuss it again, would say, we want the road diet option to be what we do, because they don't think there was enough support on that committee, or enough doubt on that committee as to the need for a big median that someday could be turned into 2 travel lanes. They would much prefer to see it shrunk. And I disagree that if we got rid of the median, it would back up turning, because the point would be to have a middle lane as a turn lane for both directions.
Oh, I was envisioning, if we try to reduce our right-of-way taking, there just wouldn't be a median. It would be a 2-lane road with bike lanes. So we're talking about a 3-lane road.
Yes.
So it's almost as wide as with the median.
Well, it's at least 11, I would guess 11 feet more narrow.
I think the median twiddle is usually 14 feet instead of
Well, the
22.
cross section we're looking at here says it's 22.
Yeah, so I think we would save 8 feet.
I see where Sean's coming from. The Gammon Road cross section, if you will, if you use that as the example, the 2-way left turn lane, or twiddle, one of my favorite words, is typically 14 feet wide with the travel lanes 11 feet. One question I would have is, why do travel lanes have to be 11 feet? But that is a pretty standard design. So that's why Sean is saying that you would only be saving about 8 feet. But one question I would have is why, I think it was your access management plan, the transportation network plan, Sean, almost 20 years ago, that had the theme, narrow roads, wide nodes, or something like that, right? So the intersections is where you need more right of way, and then between the intersections, you can get by with a more slender design.
Generally, yep. Right.
So we may not need the width of the
Right,
entire
exactly. And so I think,
corridor.
It's a good catch.
yeah, and so the other concern I would have is if it's designed, if we proceeded ultimately with let's say there was a desire to proceed with 4 lanes, 2 lanes in each direction with no median, that would make it really hard for pedestrians to cross. So
Mhm.
it really becomes important at intersections like Tribeca and Graber to have a wider right of way there to have pedestrian refuge locations. Just my 2 cents.
I thought what we were going to do this evening was to kind of reaffirm the Public Works motion.
And we can do that. I mean, that's what I'm tasked with proposing.
Which maybe I'm not understanding correctly, but I thought that we were moving just a little bit ago, the discussion was towards scrapping option A entirely and just moving to a new design that had no median in it whatsoever.
Right. Well, that's because of the discussion about road diet and interest in less pavement.
But are we actually reducing pavement, or are we just, because the median, if I understand, the median isn't a paved median, it's a grass median. Sean, am I correct on that?
That's how it's designed now, right? I mean, apart from the driveway crossovers, of course, but yeah, grass median.
One of the things when the Plan Commission originally selected or recommended that cross section to the Common Council at that time, and I think it's probably been a couple of years now, but at that time, the commission really wanted the wider median because they wanted to be able to grow trees in the median. And right now, we have a limitation with being able to plant trees in the grass median areas because of the width of the mower and getting the mowers around the trees without having to have them jump off the curb is a barrier for maintenance. So just throwing that into the mix too, that was part of the recommendation.
I wonder why we need to mow the medians.
And that's an excellent point, because I was going to point out there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 medians planned. And so that's 5 medians that need to be maintained. I think I had suggested, it might have been my first Public Works meeting, I suggested, can we look at some sort of native, even a native ground cover that doesn't require the mowing. Right now we use gas powered mowers. So, and we don't have a lot of staff to be out there mowing all the time. So, I think that's could be another reason to skip the median or plant it differently than our traditional landscaping. If we can go back to the message, I'm happy to make the motion. I think some of us were surprised at July 1 being the date. I think it was first suggested November, and Alder Wokus and I were like, November? That's a long time to continue these negotiations. I don't know what our burn rate is on the money we're paying for these negotiations, but that's a lot of time. I think they started in December of 21. Am I correct?
I think with design, I think real estate probably started last spring. So I think it's probably approaching a year.
Mhm. But if the Plan Commission's comfortable with waiting until July, and we were given assurances that that would still leave enough time, I think Kevin said yesterday by August they could have some, or by November they could have something in the way of a new design. Sean, am I remembering correctly?
That sounds right. Yeah, and he checked with his real estate person today, who thought he would agree that if by early July they can't get this agreed to, we probably just can't get it agreed to at all.
Okay, then I will, if you will allow me not to have to read the whole thing, I will move that we recommend to the Common Council the endorsement that you see on the screen. And the key aspects of it are trying to get the real estate interest secured by July 1st. And if they can't, moving on to option 4 with reconstruction to be deferred to option 20 or to 2025, which is option 5. And recognizing that any redesign would require an agreement, amended agreement with MSA, and WISDOT would have to weigh in on the modified cross-section so we could get our $1 million grant.
So you're paraphrasing this motion, but you're okay with the language as written? on
The
screen?
language as
Okay.
written, I think,
Okay.
is, it's cleaner to just use what Public Works already approved. So that's my motion.
Is there a second?
Adams will second.
Any discussion? I'll just follow up and ask, Alder Haniro, you had made a comment earlier about notifying WISDOT sooner than later. Is that because of that $1 million?
It's because WISDOT tends to take a lot of time to answer questions that we're not thinking are going to take that long. And so I think it would be prudent for staff to reach out and just run this idea by them. They might say, well, we need to see the design, but they might also be able to give us a hard no if they feel that way.
Thank you for that. Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion as written by Public Works, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. And is that enough direction, staff? Okay.
And thank you, Sean.
Yeah, thank you,
Thanks,
Sean.
Sean.
Thanks, Sean.
Number 6, subdivision ordinance rewrite agreement for consultant services. I'm going to ask staff for a brief overview.
As you all know, we've been working on the zoning ordinance for the last couple of years, and that's basically at the finish line here. But we have not yet overhauled, rewritten our land division or subdivision ordinance. And so last summer, we asked our consultant who helped us with the zoning ordinance if they were interested in helping us with the subdivision ordinance. They obviously are, these two documents are linked closely together. They don't have, they partnered then, they're proposing to partner with Strand Associates, which also has extensive consulting experience with the city, knows the city backwards and forwards. And so they developed the scope of services that we used for budgeting purposes. The council authorized up to $60,000 in this year's budget. So our staff recommendation is that you endorse the scope of services, which would then lead to developing an agreement with these firms to take to the council.
I have some questions. First of all, well, a comment first. I'm a little uncomfortable talking about this now when we are close to, I hope, closure on the zoning, lighting, and sign ordinance, but we aren't there yet. And I'm a little uncomfortable considering this now and not waiting until the zoning is officially done. Aside from that, though, how soon after the zoning code is updated are we required to update the subdivision code?
The issue is, it's not that there's a timeline, it's that there's some inconsistencies. For example, the subdivision ordinance indicates that a property is supposed to have, a lot's supposed to have 20 feet of frontage. Our zoning ordinance requires 30 feet for a lot of zoning classifications. So it's more of an issue of wanting to be consistent and not have any internal conflicts between our ordinances. So sooner is better, would be my response. I'm hopeful with the zoning ordinance. We'll obviously get to that next, but I'm hopeful that there isn't a need for any other changes of substance. So we thought it was timely to get the ball rolling on this, recognizing that the consultant won't be hired and there won't be an agreement in place essentially until the new zoning ordinance is adopted. These things take a few weeks' time. So we just thought we would get the ball rolling.
Okay. And then finally, I know Vanderwall and Associates is highly respected. We obviously use them a lot. I will say I'm disappointed that our consultant who does zoning codes and who knew that we hadn't updated our zoning code in 40 years did not advise us on the exact process we needed to follow. It was a surprise that we needed to have second hearing. That should not have been the case. And so I noted the work elements don't include any sort of briefing or timeline with clear steps under state law and our own code to indicate what the exact process is we need to follow. Because I certainly wouldn't want to have an unanticipated delay like we had at the council meeting or after our first reading of the ordinances, when we learned, oh, actually, we need to have a second hearing.
Is that the responsibility of our consultant or of the city attorney?
I think both.
And I'll take responsibility too. I mean, I could have looked at the zoning ordinance or the state statute again too. I would say it's a shared responsibility. And it was a concern I raised I think in December when I said, wow, we've made a lot of changes. Maybe we should have a hearing. So at that point, I wish I had checked the state statute, but anyway, we are where we are. And I think there's no harm. And in fact, I think it's good that there's another hearing because we have made a lot of changes. So it's just, I think up to Alder Hanaira's point, it's just unfortunate that it was done kind of in a surprise fashion. If we had gone into it, we could have had the hearing by now. You know, it just looked like we were taking steps forward, then took a step back. But it's good that we're having the hearing, I think.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
I mean, it's required.
Right,
It's
right.
what we should have had in I'm not saying anybody would have held back on suggested changes, wait, it's going to require another hearing if we make this change. I think it's appropriate that we're having the second hearing. As someone who used to work with a lot of consultants, it's just, I can't even imagine finding out after 3 years, oh, wait, we do have to have a second hearing. That should have been known on day one, what the process was. And it's possible it was. And after 3 years, it was overlooked. We've had a lot of distractions on this particular project. And if you take your eye off the ball, it drops. So anyway, I just felt like I had to say that. And I would want to see that. I still think we should hold off on the scope of services until after zoning is done. But I would want to add something into work element 1 to include a discussion or guidance on what the exact process is.
So maybe that's your feedback now, is that you'd like a revised you'd like the scope of services modified? Is that what you're essentially asking?
Yeah, I think I just feel like that's an important step. And if it wasn't spelled out in the original contract for the zoning code, maybe it just didn't get done. I also would welcome input from staff as to how useful you would find optional tasks 3 and 4.
Thank you. I was thinking along those lines as well.
Is that the traffic, that's the updating our access management plan and what's the other one? Oh, the design guidelines. Yeah. Well, I mean, again, we want our documents that we use to review developments to be consistent with one another. So I consider those to be essential, and we might as well, after all the effort we've put into our zoning, sign and lighting ordinances, we might as well make sure that we have everything consistent.
I agree. I think this is important. I'm not as concerned as you are, Alder Nero, about deferring action on this right now. We're just authorizing the work to proceed, not that the work is actually going to proceed or that it's going to be not in response to the zoning ordinance as it's finally adopted. And I think I liked staff's recommendation of staying with this consultant because they've done the zoning code. They do a lot of our work. I think having too many players could just make it more confusing. So I'm very comfortable with the recommendation.
Are you making a motion or is anyone making a motion?
Do you have a recommended motion?
Yeah, it was in the staff comments that to recommend that the common council enter an agreement with Vandal and Associates for up to $59,800 to undertake this project. I think as part of that, regardless of what form your motion takes, I am going to talk with the consultant about adding the language that Alder Hanero has mentioned. I mean, I would do that because I think that's a great addition. So
Can we just make that a condition of our recommendation?
sure. So
Well, yeah, the motion hasn't been made yet, so that could be added. Can we also add wording to say after the zoning that, recommend or move that after the zoning code is adopted, the common council enter into an agreement? I'm just mindful of the criticism we've heard repeatedly that we rushed the process, and I feel like this doesn't seem to be urgent tonight. But if the motion includes in it, this is a future action that will only happen after council approves the zoning code, then I'm comfortable with that.
So I'll make a motion that we recommend that the common council enter into an agreement with Vanderwall and Associates for up to $59,800 to undertake the subdivision ordinance rewrite project with two conditions. The first condition being that the work not on this rewrite not commence until after the zoning ordinance is adopted. And the second condition is that we add language in the the scope of services to include Alder Hanero, your language, please.
Mark, you got the
The
language.
addition of language to the scope of services delineating the procedures for procedural steps or
Under state law.
Under state law.
Yeah.
And that's to work element number 1.
Yes.
Thank you.
So you made the motion. Is there a second?
Somerville second.
Any comments? All those in favor of approving as noted, all of the changes, but the recommendation that the common council enter an agreement with Vanderwall and Associates for up to $59,800 to undertake this project with two noted differences.
can I flip those two around? I think it would be, I'll flip those two conditions around if that's okay with you. It just would flow better. Okay.
Please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. A very robust discussion and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Thanks, everyone. Moving on to zoning ordinance, chapter 10, and official zoning map changes since the commission's previous recommendation. Staff, I know that we often talk about zoning changes and we talk sort of in a flow basis of for 10, 22, and 33 being the chapters. But if we could focus on the one at a time.
Yep, I've
Just
got
the
this.
changes.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. So I did prepare some remarks. This is a different type of review than you've had in the past in some ways. Wisconsin statutes, as already has been mentioned, require that the Plan Commission have the opportunity to provide feedback on ordinance changes made by the council with a public hearing held on the final draft of the new ordinance. This hearing will be held before the council on February 20th. The draft in the meeting packet summarizes all substantive revisions made since the hearing held by the Plan Commission on November 14th. Substantive changes made since the Plan Commission's December 12th recommendation are highlighted in red. We are suggesting to you tonight, or we're asking that you focus your review on the substantive changes made since your December 12th recommendation. I also wanted to add that we are aware as staff of 2 statements provided in recent days pertaining to the zoning ordinance. The town of Middleton has sent 2 letters this week that were addressed to the council, but not to the Plan Commission. So I don't know if you received them, but if not, then I just wanted you to be aware of that. So they are addressed to the council for the public hearing next week. And then the second one is Bill Connors, representing Smart Growth Madison, sent to the Plan Commission directly on Friday evening, comments that focused on the bird safe glass provisions and requirements. The language before you is exactly as it was written in the draft ordinance until late September. But then we made some changes, and I can go into that in greater detail if you'd like later. So in summary, unless you see something glaring that needs attention, my colleagues here and I recommend endorsing the ordinance and map as currently drafted, because making any further changes, particularly if they are substantive, may prompt the need for holding a third hearing so as to provide reasonable notice to the public, thereby further delaying adoption of the new zoning ordinance. So that would be my introductory remarks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That was very good. Since you shared a little bit about the town of Middleton's 2 letters, and I see that you did not receive it, I just want to go over that for 1 minute. And from my recall, there were a lot of emails this weekend. So I'm gonna lean on staff support a little. Their concern was mainly about the airport, the map. So that would be chapter 10. Their concern was the map and just the airport zone. In previous months, we did see some of the same comments, a little bit about the heliport and a little bit about the bar restaurant concept. So Mark, did I get that accurate?
Yeah, they didn't address them to you at all. So as far as I'm concerned, those haven't been referred to you. The council referred the ordinance as is in your packet. And I only brought it up just in the interest of transparency, but I wasn't even provided a copy of the comments until my colleagues provided them to me. So this was clearly something intended for the council.
Okay,
So,
well, thank
yeah.
you for that. But I want to make sure that, like you're talking about the transparency,
Right.
that you all know it is things, if you think back, I think we saw a lot of the same discussion previously. And I think we had robust discussions at that time about it. And so I do feel, this is my part of my thought process, I do feel we covered that in previous Plan Commission meetings. So I feel pretty comfortable in having heard them out. So, but now for number 7, chapter 10, it's the overall zoning ordinance and official map, and you're going through it right now.
I was simply going to ask if anybody had any questions. I wasn't going to go through this in step by step, because the way I prepared this memo was in sequence with how the ordinance is written. And I'm hopeful that you find all the changes and revisions, most of which were initiated by the council. A few of them were initiated by staff. I'm hopeful that you don't have any objections with any of them. But if you do, I think it would be easier just to ask you to point out what you would like to discuss.
And just since I'm the council's representative on the Plan Commission, I just want to say, with the exception of the bird-friendly glass, I think, well, and actually we did discuss that too. There weren't, to my recollection, any changes that were like, well, the Plan Commission didn't agree with such and such, or didn't talk about it, and so we're going to make this change. It was stuff like I don't know if you remember the discussion of the feather signs. We never really got to specifying in the Plan Commission, Yeah, we should let more than one feather sign in a festival situation. You know, you can't have one or one per lot would not be feasible. So it changed to say, I think one per vendor or organization, you know, and it's still on a temporary basis. There were a couple of definition changes. I think the treatment of the PDDs was something that the city attorney added. Cultivation in the air district, that was something I noticed after the plan commission had already signed off that cultivation, which actually does take place in the air district, was not listed as a conditional use. So that was added. We had some changes to the SRH district. This was mainly in relation to the street-facing garages and SRM and SRH districts. I feel very strongly that there shouldn't be provisions that are specific to one type of neighborhood or residence, such as a lakeshore lot. Like, why should the view of someone's lake be, or why should someone's view of the lake be more important than someone's view of the Conservancy, for example? So that was, Mark changed that wording to eliminate the reference specifically to lakeshore lots. What else, Mark? I'm looking through here.
Highlighted in red.
Oh, the community and market garden. That was another one that, you know, again, while reading the accessory buildings paragraph, I'm looking at page 115 of the packet. It just didn't make sense that all accessory structures would be limited to 1,000 feet. We took it back up to 1,200 square feet and then decided that I think my objection was that raised and accessible planting beds shouldn't be considered accessory structures. Those should be viewed as like integral to the purpose of the community and market garden district. And so it turned out it was just unclear wording. It wasn't intended that those would be considered accessory structures that would be limited to the 1,200 square feet. So that was changed to make that clear. What else? Vehicle access standards. I don't remember why that one changed, Mark. I think that was a recommendation.
That was something that was something we initiated. In the course of reviewing in the course of getting an inquiry about a particular property in the city, I noticed that there was some potentially contradictory language in the code, 10 feet versus 5 feet. I can't remember exactly. Yeah, it was 10 versus 5. And I thought, let's just eliminate that contradiction. It's just one of those minor things.
Mm-hmm. And then the bird safe glass that was brought up by Alder Nelson, who noted that the Madison court case had been settled or decided in Madison's favor. And so we changed, and the Plan Commission had talked about this, that the reason it was recommended, not required, is because it wasn't clear whether we could require it. So that changed.
I'm going
Go
to ask
ahead.
you to,
Yeah.
well, you're doing a great job, by the way.
And I think that
Might be one of the last
that was
ones.
it. Yeah.
Did everybody get the comment on the bird glass
Yeah,
from the,
Mr. Connors. Bill
did
Connors.
everyone here get that? Because that was the one thing I didn't realize is that Madison is the 2x2. And he was noting how 2x4 is standard.
I can address that if you like.
Please do.
At this time?
Yes, please.
Sure.
I wasn't clear. I didn't recall that from our discussion. So
Sure.
could you help me through that?
Sure. So elaborating on Alder Hanairo's summary, the litigation of Madison's ordinance, which they had been enforcing all along, from what I'm hearing from Madison staff, that was before the Wisconsin Court of Appeals. And at the time, Mr. Connors suggested it would be prudent to wait until this litigation is resolved. That litigation related to whether bird-friendly glass is a building code provision, in which case the ordinance is preempted by state law. I won't go into all the details, but the point is the litigation was in favor of Madison and there was no appeal of that decision. So the issue before us now is the language that was drafted in the ordinance as advisory, as required, and then became advisory, now is being proposed for being required again. The 2.2, the 2 by 2 inch language is, I did ask Madison's assistant zoning administrator about this and heard back from him yesterday. And the origin, the impetus for that, and I found this online as well, is that various stakeholders in Madison advocated for a dot pattern density of 2 by 2, consistent with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service recommendations, which stated that a 2 by 2 grid is especially important for protecting small birds like hummingbirds. It is true that there are communities that regulate dots spaced at a minimum of 4 inches, but the 2 by 2 grid does seem to be readily available from what I've seen, from what I heard from Madison and from what I saw online. I have asked Madison to provide data or estimates on how much, in terms of a percentage, bird safe standards have increased development expenses over the use of standard windows. I have not received a response on that yet, but I would like to. I think that's an important piece of the puzzle. What I did learn from going through this is that there's over 1 billion birds that have collisions with windows estimated. And I don't know if that's worldwide or if that's just in the US, but it's a lot more birds than I realized. We did have a comment recently that a developer wasn't aware of any bird strikes, but I think, I mean, speaking for my own house, I know what happens, and it's definitely something very commonplace. There are some communities around the country that have adopted voluntary standards, but there does seem to be a movement in the last couple of years to have mandatory bird-friendly standards. The costs, the concerns raised by the local development community via Mr. Connors is that this could increase the cost of housing, aesthetic concerns, and I think he was also concerned about effects on energy consumption. So anyway, that's a summary of the input we got. It's input that was addressed to you, and I presume that'll be a similar communication. We'll just include that as part of the public hearing input for next week. I assume we'll get a separate communication, but if not, we'll just include this one.
I have one follow-up. Can you tell me, as much as you know, of the birds that tend to hit, is it a certain level? Because at first I was like, well, maybe we should do it over 6 stories or 8 stories. And then I was made aware that it's actually lower than
Sure,
that.
I can summarize our code for you. So this would apply to all at-grade glass. So glass that's at ground level, regardless of building size. It would also apply to all above-ground sky bridges, like the one we talked about today on University Avenue, regardless of building size. And then it would apply to the first 5 stories of structures that have more than 10,000 square feet above above ground, 10,000 square feet of floor area. And then there are some distinctions made for whether the facade is at least 50%, facade of the building is at least 50% glass or less than 50%. There's some fine points to that. So it would also, the regulations would also apply to expansion of existing buildings and structures. The calculations would not pertain to spandrel or opaque glass with reflectivity of 14% or less.
So you're saying
So-
up to 5 stories?
Up to 5 stories is how that's how that's written. And anything above that is not as much of a,
It's more bird friendly?
well, it's not, I think it's not as common for birds to have impacts at that elevation.
Great. Okay, well, see, now I'm learning. This is good. Did you have a comment?
So I was missing for the initial discussion on this. I don't want to trigger a third hearing or anything like that, but having talked to many of our developer clients and even just other people around town, there is no precise data on this. And I mean, we'll take the Olive apartment downtown Madison, and they are picking up birds left and right every day, and that's bird safe glass. So I just think we should really consider, I can pull data from some of our own clients as to how much it increases their costs, but without knowing exactly how it impacts, but knowing how the financial impact and could discourage development in Middleton, I just think that should pause and think about, heavily recommended versus required. And I just wanted to put that out there since I wasn't part of the initial discussion.
Sounds like you're talking about that trade-off.
Right.
That's really hard.
Yeah.
So, thank you for that. Especially as we often do talk about affordable housing and, keeping the cost low of housing, whether it is an apartment, single family homes, or all the things. So I'm mindful of that. And I was thinking the same thing yesterday. I was going over the packets. I would love to support, these bird friendly windows. But I did not know about the Olive as what you said it was called the Olive?
Yeah.
And is it a new building downtown?
On Gorham.
Okay. And is it 5-10 stories-ish?
Anything down there is probably at least 10
Yeah,
stories.
it's something
okay.
a solid 10.
So it's seeing action, being downtown. So thank you for that anecdotal note.
And the only other point I wanted to make is licensed architects in the room will probably speak better to it, but there are, other design elements like offsetting columns and things like that that you can do. I know our building on Parmenter Center there has exactly that, since it's located right on Pheasant Branch Creek, that, deters those collisions more too.
Does it?
I know aesthetically architects like to line things up, but there are those options in design if there's a concern too, so.
And that's to reduce bird run-ins. Okay. Just clarifying, because I want to make sure, as I'm learning from you,
Yeah.
there are other things.
Yeah, I mean, there's other reasons they can do that, but in our particular building, that was why they did it.
Now, this side of the room's been quiet. Maybe you're more pro bird.
Yeah, and
Or
to be
pro
clear,
2x2.
I'm very pro nature,
Yes,
pro
she is very
animals, pro
pro-bird,
everything.
yes.
I just wanted to put that out there since I didn't get to be part of that initial discussion. And just from the conversations I've had, with clients and consultants since then, it's just might be something we want to consider.
Is there a percentage that you found that it increases costs? Do you know, can you speak to that?
I don't have stats on a straight percentage because it really depends on, the size of the development, how much glass is
I
on
wonder-
there. It's going to vary a great amount. I can quote one of our, and I don't really, since this is not on the public table yet, I'm not going to share the client, but they found that it would increase it almost $80,000 for their development. So when you talk about market,
But is that
costs.
a $10 million project? I mean, that's,
I understand it's relevant. So
I think one of the developers told me it was well into the hundreds of thousands for their potential. It was a very large, because she was sharing in passing. So,
yeah, this would be a 30,000 square foot.
yeah, it's always hard because we're trying to do all the right things. Is there anyone that hasn't thought about the 2x2 or the 2x4 or, and I'm going to try and paraphrase this, it'd be more like highly recommend the bird glass versus mandate. Is that
Yeah,
what
and the only
you're-
suggestion I had for pairing that is just openly thinking here, is there some type of incentive like the bonus stories, with green features that you could pair with that to highly encourage it, but not severely limit? That's all I gotta say.
Thank you.
I appreciate that we're bringing this up to discuss, because I feel like we didn't really discuss it because it was in limbo with Madison for so long. And then it just came before us at the final meeting and we just basically were like, yes, let's change the language to should instead of shall. But we never discussed the language. So first of all, there needs to be a correction in one of the words in 3-4B, third line down. Middle of the sentence after mullions, cider should be wider.
oh, good catch. Lisa, you missed it.
Sleeping on the job.
She knows I appreciate it.
In terms of the 2x2, that is actually also a National Green Building Council lead standard, and it is because of the hummingbirds. So that's actually been the new standard since 2019. So we do have hummingbirds here, maybe in other communities where they don't have hummingbird migration, it might not be an issue, but here that would be the correct standard. In terms of the cost, I had read about the Minneapolis stadium, which was built in the late teens. And it's a 200,000 square foot stadium, almost entirely glass. And the cost to use bird safe glass instead of regular glass was only $1 million on a $7 billion project. That's negligible. And so to talk about the cost, it is quite difficult to make a statement because there are so many options, and our language in our proposed ordinance is very broad, very liberal. There are many ways to make a building bird safe. And in fact, I think that saying bird safe glass isn't as accurate as saying bird safe building design standard, because simply reducing the amount of glass makes the building more energy efficient and bird safe. There are things you can do to make the building bird safe that don't increase the cost at all. In fact, they make it more energy efficient. And some of the arguments about the energy efficiency, well, you can't use high E glass with the UV dots. Well, the UV dots don't work on raptors, kingfishers, woodpeckers, many species. I counted 23 species on the list of Pheasant Branch Conservancy birds that the UV glass wouldn't even work for. I had a raptor die at my front door. I've had 7 bird crashes, including an indigo bunting, a female cardinal, a very large hawk, and several other small songbirds. And it's really quite distressing. If there's a building built and people are residing next to the conservancy and they're having birds dying on their window, it's not pleasant. I mean, residents don't want this. So I just have to make, a statement about that, because it is pretty, it's very disquieting to have a large bird. I mean, it really affected me for a long time. But using like a ceramic frit, that increases it reduces the thermal load, the insulation of the building, and actually makes the glass more energy efficient. So because there are so many options, and the more and more communities that adopt bird safe policies, and like the United States since it was proposed in 2019, 2020, 2021, I think all new national buildings need to be built with bird safe glass. I mean, it's a standard that's going to be incorporated more and more, and that means that more and more options will be available. On a residence, something as simple as putting the screen on the outside of the window instead of the inside of the window now makes that window bird safe, right? All you need is something that makes it a visual plane that the bird can't pass through, instead of looking like it's more territory to pass through. So I think because we have created an ordinance that's so gracious in how that could be accommodated, I don't think it needs to add any cost. And in fact, having this ordinance supports our other goals of energy efficiency. I went through our adopted comprehensive plan and looked at all of the actions that this would support, that we've already said these are actions that the community has voted to adopt. And I found quite a few that bird safe glass would support. So, I mean, I can go through them if you would like and spell them out for the record, or, you can recall on your own that, we have language that says things like community value of sustainability, land use goals to protect natural resources, a green city goal, and stewardship of nature, short-term action goal GC4A to create bird-friendly building ordinance that reduces bird collision and mortality in all new developments. Action GP6G, best practices for preserving dark sky, which is also important in the bird safe. So I think that this supports a lot of the goals that the city has already said that we are trying to achieve. And in fact, these were short-term action goals, not long-term action goals. You know, and it supports our national and international migratory bird laws as well. So I think that this is doing a good thing. It's something that the community has said that they wanted and doesn't need to increase the cost of a development. So I support it. And in fact, I'm guessing that this language came directly from Madison's language of their ordinance, but I looked at just all of the data first. Then later we got the letter, and then later I looked at the ordinance. And honestly, it feels like, I don't know if this would be a big change, but for the buildings over 10,000 square feet, it seems like the change should be in excess of 40% glass in 4C1A, because that's really where the impact of bird safe glass is going to make the largest effect. So I had read from a long-term study in New York City. For every 10% increase in glass, there's a 19% increase in bird collisions in spring and 31% increase in bird collisions in fall. So ideally, a building is less than 25% glass at the lower levels, but certainly less than 40%. And above 40%, you're really going to need to have some bird safe glass measures to prevent some, quite a few deaths. And in terms of the height of how high the bird safe glass should go, that depends on the reflectivity of the surrounding height of the trees. And since Middleton has mature trees and the Conservancy is mature trees, it should probably be one of the higher standards. 85 feet is a typical higher standard. New York has 100 feet. Some communities only have 40 and 50 feet. Madison has 50 feet. But with our proximity to the Conservancy and all of the mature neighborhoods we have, I would suggest that we have it to 85 feet. You had said 5 stories, but I don't see that here, so I'm not sure.
It's 60 feet. I was
60 feet.
paraphrasing.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so that was really great. And I loved the comprehensive plan and the research that you weaved it in. And I love that you shared that you've seen it in your own house. So I'm trying to just have that back and forth a little bit for a minute. And I'm not that I'm questioning you or saying you're wrong, but just kind of go with me on this. You said that you had seven birds over time hit your house.
We moved in 2016, in
Okay.
December 2016.
That helps me in making sure it's not like 40 years worth. It's just 7. So that's like 1 a year. That's not good. Do you live like next to the Conservancy, back to it, within a block of it, within a mile? Can you help me with that?
We back up to the Conservancy across the street, so we're in a neighborhood across from the Conservancy.
Okay. The reason I'm sharing is that we get migratory birds in my backyard. In winter, I see hundreds in the morning. To my knowledge, I've never had one hit my house. My back of my house is well over 40% windows. Maybe ours are dirty. Maybe they can't see it. I don't know.
Dirty is a way to make it birds.
Thank goodness for hand painting children. But the reason I share that is, I don't want birds to be running into things. I too saw some when I lived in Chicago, not in the building I lived in, but one of the ones we worked in. But that was over like a 12-year span. And I think I saw 2. I was on the 10th floor. Maybe I was too high. What this makes me think about is if it's happening at your house on that first, second floor, that's what I'm guessing is you have a 2 floor. I was thinking that the bird glass would be more for, and maybe I should have read closer, but it was more on commercial buildings like apartments going high in the sky. If it's happening at the households, is that the expectation? Is that we change those as well? And if yes, just based on your discussion, you know, we're not building a lot of houses. We aren't. What I'm trying to say is heretofore, is your vision anybody with 1 to 2 stories up to 5 or 7, have burnt glass, and that might be a yes. That doesn't mean you're wrong. I just am trying to understand. And then if you built a building prior to 2023 in your 4-story apartment or a family house, and you don't have bird glass, these things are still happening. So do you see what I'm saying? We are creating a new
We can't
cost.
create policies
for-
about the zoning code in retrospect, right?
True.
There's other ways to help try to prevent bird collisions through community engagement that don't involve the zoning code. So I don't think I'm hoping to create that scope in this rewrite.
I would ask staff, can you clarify what buildings? What does this?
Sure. So on the screen, if you scroll up, please, Jeff. So C, number 1 is the language pertaining to buildings over 10,000 square feet. And then it divides, it categorizes them according to whether they have, according to how much glass they have. The 50% or greater has certain standards. And then if it's less than 50%, it has certain standards. The second number is sky bridges for buildings and structures of any size. So using the University Avenue example we heard about today, so that bridge connecting the building, having it be all glass, as Commissioner Bruce mentioned, would then fall under that category, regardless of the size of that building, although in that case, that's a 10,000 plus square foot building. And then the third category, I would interpret that to apply what it says for buildings and structures of any size. So if you have glass that's at ground level, behind a bush or a hedge or something like that, I would interpret this to apply as well. So that would be a residential application. Oftentimes our standards are specific to commercial, and I anticipated this question too, because I was wondering it as well. The way this code is, where this is in the code is under performance standards, and our code, the performance standards includes parking, which pertains to houses. It includes fence regulations, pool design, things like that. So there's other provisions in Article 6 that pertain to single-family residences. So I am confident that this would apply to a single-family structure as well, for if it has at-grade glass.
But only at-grade glass features such as
Correct. Sorry, thank you for finishing that.
That wouldn't be all first floor windows.
No, it wouldn't. That's not how I would read that. So in other words, it wouldn't go as far as what Commissioner Hermans is mentioning. I mean, I would say though, I would be concerned about deviating from Madison's standards, because first of all, this is what's been published for months now. And to make it more restrictive would cause me concern. I would rather see us take up anything that's more restrictive as a separate process where we go back and dot I's and cross T's on anything we missed. If in the course of a few months that we find there's some things in the zoning ordinance that we didn't anticipate that are happening, I fully expect that there'll be a few things here and there that we maybe didn't think of. I'm hoping that is obviously at a minimum, but I assume that later this year we'll have a cleanup ordinance, which will then involve a public hearing. And if we wanted to introduce other restrictions, that would be the better time to do it. I would be uncomfortable making anything more restrictive now prior to the hearing on Tuesday, just because that would then, I think, extend the approval process.
Would you would you be comfortable with incorporating the language the smart growth Madison representative had suggested regarding the 2x4 pattern versus the 2x2 pattern?
It sounds like 2x2 is the standard.
Well, he provided a link that 2x4 is, I do see that out there as well. But I think there clearly is evidence that 2x2 is an acceptable standard as well. So to change it to 2x4 would be a less restrictive requirement. So, you know, I think that would be appropriate to reduce it.
I'm just bringing that up. I think Mayor Kuhn was making the suggestion that we need to weigh costs versus benefits. And we have had not a lot of input from I should say, you know, the input we've had has been over a few items, not a wide range of items. The bird glass thing is one of the few things that I've heard from the development community on. And I mean, personally, I would be comfortable taking that suggestion. We're making an improvement. We're maybe not going quite as dense of a pattern as Madison is, which admittedly is not going to be as safe for birds, but we are making an improvement and we are balancing costs versus benefits. So I would be comfortable with that if it does not mess up the flow of this process.
I am moved by Commissioner Birdman Herman's comments. I live in the same neighborhood, and I too have been traumatized by birds. We built we call it our garden room because it's like a four-season sunroom, a lot of glass and a lot of bird strikes that we've now tried to address with things on the outside. And, you know, as far as aesthetics, there was a picture in the message that we got from Smart Growth, and it showed the dots as if to indicate this is unsightly. I don't think that's unsightly. I think it's unsightly to have the smear of a bird on the outside of your window, especially when it's high up and you can't immediately go clean it. And you look at that and realize, you know, it's, even if it was just a sweaty bird, you know, that bird probably went off and died of its injuries. I'm persuaded by the cost information that you shared. In fact, I would encourage you to come to the hearing on Tuesday and make a public comment very similar to what you said. It's online or available on Zoom too, because I think the council members would find that very interesting. We did get, council members received a message from Alder Dave Lorman from District 7 sharing some of the research he found that also supported the contention that it is not as costly as it has been made out to be. And I would say to Commissioner Bruce's comment, I agree. I think I've noted that we had very little input on most of the code, just, you know, aside from the map. I anticipate we will hear a lot of support on Tuesday from the Friends of Pheasant Branch, Audubon, or whatever their current name is. And I would say that the strongest comment, and one of the only comments, we've only gotten two, another one came from a developer who claims to never have had a bird strike any of his buildings, which frankly, I think is a ridiculous claim to make. I'll just say it because if the reason birds aren't piling up outside buildings is because they fly away and die of their injuries, or they are stunned and get picked up by some critter that's out there looking for an easy meal. I personally think Middleton being I'll say we're the Conservancy City. When we were just developing the strategic plan, I really thought we should start branding ourselves as the Conservancy City, because the Pheasant Branch Conservancy and other conservancies are a huge part of who we are. I can't imagine us not having a bird safe glass or design requirement. I don't think it's part of our LEED certification, but it probably will become part of LEED municipalities certification. And I support keeping, I support keeping the code the way it is for now, but I like the suggestion of putting on the list of things to consider with the first update. Commissioner Erdman Herman's comments about the 40% and the 85 feet. I would put that right up there by low impact development among the things that we should look at.
I just
Next
have one
time.
other comment on cost, and that is that the cost of renting apartments in Middleton is largely a market-driven factor, right? We have very old apartment buildings that are renting really above what they should be rented at because of the demand push. It's market-driven. And so the cost that went into it plays a very small role in the end. And again, it can be mitigated by many other ways than using the most expensive bird glass option. So
I would, it's a fair point, but it still strikes me that you being close to the Conservancy have bird accidents at your house, and so do you, but that I don't. And so why is there an experience?
most bird strikes happen at dawn when people are sleeping, so you might not hear it. And then they do fly away or get picked up by other critters and eaten. So that, like most bird strikes, you will not find a dead bird next to your house. I actually hear a lot of bird strikes, but I've found 7 dead birds. So, and then we
Again,
do have, like, our
I'm-
land use map has a lot of development coming in near around the Conservancy, like the 4 apartments that we just approved at our last meeting. Those are essentially right next to the Conservancy. And so as we have more building, and the new one on Century and Allen, that's right next to the Conservancy as well.
Okay,
And-
thank you. I would
Yeah.
like to finish.
Okay.
What I was trying to say was there may be a corridor where you have more strikes. I would like to share that I'm usually up at dawn. It's the only time I have alone time in my house. So I'm usually looking out my back window at the birds, sipping my coffee, because I'm a painter and I like to watch the sunrise. So at
Do you
dawn,
have screens on your house?
nope,
No screens on your windows?
nope, no window shades. I would say I watch the sunrise 80% of the year, if not more. So is it the 2 minutes I ran to change the laundry? Is it the 1 minute I ran upstairs?
Well,
Likely,
we can't make a
what
policy
I'm
on
saying- wait,
your
let me
experience when
finish.
we have
Let me
national
finish.
studies.
Let me finish. The reason I say that is that your argument was, I get a bird dead every year. We can't make policy because of your experience. You just said that to me. It's the
not-
same.
That wasn't why that's not how I proposed.
So
May-
let me finish. The reason I said this is that it sounds to me that there is a corridor where there's a higher volume or likelihood of bird issues. And I think that's what you're talking to me about, is it's by the Conservancy. And so one of the things I'm thinking as we talk is perhaps it would be good to do something like the 2x4, which Commissioner Bruce is talking about to start with, but make a recommendation that if you live within 2 blocks of the Conservancy or 3 blocks, and like you said, those apartments that are coming up happen to be by them, that they should be considering the 2x2. Because of what you're saying about the hummingbirds or the higher
Have
traction.
enough information to be making this statement. So first of all, half of bird collisions are likely happening in rural areas. And when you take down habitat and put a building there, the bird still goes back there and it crashes into the glass because it's not expecting it. So anytime you create a new building where there once was habitat, you're going to have bird collisions. And to make the statement that we should change from 2x2 to a 2x4 standard without doing any cost analysis where does that come from?
Are you talking on the corridor?
The corridor is the Mississippi Flyway where 40% of migratory birds
No,
go
I'm
through our
talking about
entire
the
state.
May,
Yeah,
may I
Alder
comment?
Hanaro.
I agree that we can't make policy based on one data point, whether it's my garden room or Commissioner Erdman Hermans's experience confirming 7 bird deaths, or Commissioner Summers mentioning of the olive in Madison. We can't make policy with one data point or based on one data point, no matter what that point is. I do think we need to look at the bigger data. And I think my colleague from my neighborhood has done a really good job laying out national data, some cost estimates that are proven, that are documented, as opposed to speculative. And on top of all that, I feel very strongly that we have a really good code that has been passed with support from council once on one read. I'm not saying we can't make changes, but I would say the changes we make we should reserve that for only the most important things. And I don't think this is it. I think there could be an argument to make for having this be a requirement in a certain corridor. I do think the corridor would be much bigger than you might think.
Fair.
And so I would suggest that go on the list. Do we need to identify bird flyway corridors and research that? But I don't think we have the data to make an intelligent decision to change what we currently have in the code. And my recommendation would be, if I were to make a motion, I would move that we recommend to council the zoning sign and outdoor lighting ordinances as they are right now for council to support the February 20th hearing. That would be my motion.
Are you saying chapter 10, 22, and
Chapter,
33?
yep.
Is there
I
a
would second
second?
that.
Any comments?
And this isn't, and you're not just talking about the bird glass, you're talking about everything.
I'm talking about everything. And we can still discuss it. One thing I wanted to mention was the Airport Commission had recommended eliminating the condition or keeping it a conditional use to have a restaurant, tavern, or indoor entertainment facility. I forget the phrasing. Eliminating the requirement that it be located in the terminal building. Again, we talked about that at our meeting, and I just kept emphasizing, why would we want to allow somebody to put a bar in their hangar? That just doesn't make sense, especially since our airport master plan calls for building more hangars because we don't have enough hangar space. So I think keeping it within the terminal building or attached to the terminal building is a fine conditional use option. And I go back to the council has already, by its initial vote, as ill-advised as it might have been for us to take that vote without having a second hearing. I mean, it demonstrated that the council does support what's in the zoning code. And I don't see this as an urgent change, the airport commission's recommendation. And I don't, I would note that Rich Morey, who is our FBO for the site, he himself said he couldn't imagine a restaurant, tavern, or indoor entertainment place going anywhere but the terminal building. So I'm comfortable with the codes, all three of them, the way they are currently written, and that would be my recommendation to my colleagues to support it. Because we've said throughout this whole process, we recognize it's 40 years in the making. This is such a big change. We know we're going to have to tweak things, and we can't wait until it's perfect at some point, we just have to let it go, put it into practice and keep that list of things we know now that we would like to consider in the future, but things that'll come up during the implementation.
Mark?
Alderman Nairo, is the language on the screen, that's roughly what you said, but I wondered if you can support that language to support well, I'll let you read it. Better.
Yeah, I guess that's better than my as they are language.
But what I thought would be helpful for the commission is to emphasize that you support the changes that the council has made. In other words, that's what this says, and to recommend that the council adopt the new ordinance and map.
I would strike the word new.
Oh, fine.
I want to just, I need some clarification. Yeah, I think everybody understands. I'm supportive of the code. We've all been working on it for quite a while. But this is talking about not just the code, not just the ordinance, but the map also, the zoning map also. And this is just talking about changes made since the December 12th date. I think I'm fine with all that, but if I remember correctly, I did not vote in support of the zoning map originally. And I want to make sure that I'm consistent in my action this evening, and that's clear that I am I'm not changing that. I'm still felt that the zoning map as it was originally approved needed some adjustment. And I don't know if I don't know if this action tonight is really restating the zoning map approval, or if we're just really talking about December 12th.
The reason I suggested this language for the motion, and I think Alder Hanairo was combining the two, although obviously she can state that herself, is ultimately what the council is adopting is an ordinance amendment that combines those as one ordinance. Both the zoning ordinance and the zoning map and the fee adjustments are all part of the zoning ordinance. So if you're wanting to parse out the ordinance text from the map, I suppose that could be done with two separate motions here, but the
Wait,
motion, I'm
I'm
not
sorry.
trying to confuse
What?
things, so.
Wait, hold on.
Okay.
This is about the changes since
That's-
December 12th.
Is it just about the changes since December 12th?
That was my understanding. Only the red changes from the council. Is that accurate?
That might be the easiest way to handle this. So maybe the motion on the screen, maybe it should be, that's why I was emphasizing the revisions, that you support the revisions made to the ordinance and zoning maps since the December 12th meeting. And you could just leave it at that. I guess that would be.
Because one of the reason the map is noted is, remember, it's the airport.
Yeah, the only change
There
made
was
to
a
the map. The only change made to the map was that the council endorsed changing the parcels of the airport parcels from planned development district to air. That's the
what
only
it was.
change to the map that was made.
Okay, but and I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
What I just want, I'm there's been a lot of rework of this process, right? I mean, and additional hearings, which I haven't been part of or really totally understand what happened at council. I just want to make sure that what the action is tonight, if it's just the work that's been done since December 12th, that's one thing. If it's really saying, hey, I'm if I need to restate my position on the zoning map as a whole, that's a different vote.
The state statute says, I'll just read the sentence, the council may make changes in the tentative recommendations. In other words, the ones that were recommended by the Plan Commission in December. The council may make changes in the recommendations after first submitting the proposed changes to the Plan Commission and then other bodies if those exist, which don't. So the Plan Commission for recommendations and report, and after publishing a Class 2 notice under state statute of the proposed changes and hearings thereon. So Commissioner Bruce, I think your request is, what I'm hearing is that you're okay with the changes that the council has recommended, but you, since December 12th, well, and actually since the, well,
Since December
since December
12th.
12th, yes, exactly. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, I can see how that would be a simpler way to handle it, but
Two things. I would want to make sure that there's nothing in the law that says the plan commission has to recommend the code. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if we're parsing it down to changes made, but the statute makes it sound like, no, it's the whole thing. We need to know that. So maybe look at that. But two, to Commissioner Bruce's point, I understand what you're saying. I would note that the minutes of our meeting on December 12th, there were two motions at the end of our discussion of the zoning code. One was on 2159 Allen, and that was a 4-3 vote to keep the designation of avenue mixed use. The next motion was to recommend that the Common Council approve the zoning, sign, and outdoor lighting ordinances and the zoning map as reflecting the changes agreed upon by the Plan Commission during the meeting shown in green and contingent on final city attorney review, and that passed 7-0. So I think if it would be cleaner or less risky, there's no loophole we're missing, it would be better to approve again the zoning, sign, and outdoor lighting ordinances and the zoning map as reflecting the changes, like use this motion, but apply it to the changes made after December 12th. I would do that and have you make a statement with your vote that you don't support the map. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
But
I just, there has been a lot of discussion, I know on the community level about the process and the speed with which this has happened. And much of it has been revolving around the Allen Boulevard site. And even within this committee are grappling with that issue. And I think the closest, I think that the 4-3 vote really represents our committee's view relative to that site. The reason that the next one went unanimously, we'd already established the Allen Boulevard, so it's a little bit disingenuous to say that the zoning map was approved 7-0. I mean,
right, no, and I
yeah.
I would not say it was,
Yeah.
but the package
Yeah.
as a whole, yeah.
So, yes, I just want to make sure that we're representing clearly what the committee's view is, and I'm just speaking for myself here, not other people on the commission. I want to make that clear as well. But in terms of my position, I'm totally okay with what's happened since December 12th. The changes that have been made seem all logical and workable. But I guess I would want to make sure that, and I can do that here, just make sure that my thoughts are clear as to the zoning map.
Thank you for that. Now we had a motion. Do we have a second motion?
Well,
Or we're working through that motion, adding the December 12th?
did you quadruple check the statute to make
Yeah,
sure
I just reread it. Abby just read it. It's one of those statutes that has, talks about military bases. It talks about all these other things that you need to do and if there's other bodies, et cetera. It very clearly states that you're supposed to be having an opportunity for the Plan Commission to review the changes and issue recommendation and report on the changes. I'm very, very comfortable with that, that you've done that tonight. If there's discomfort and Commissioner Bruce, you talked about how the vote that you had where you expressed your opinion on the zoning map was one vote, and then there was a separate vote that discussed the whole package. I mean, so in other words, there's no changes to the issue that caused you to have the concern with the previous vote, if that makes any sense. So,
Okay. Yes, that's accurate.
so,
So I think we should focus on just the changes.
right.
And I appreciate that you looked at the state statute and you feel comfortable that it's just on the changes since December 12th. I just want to double check because we spent a voluminous and robust discussion on bird policy and bird glass policy, that was something that is on the discussion for council. Did I understand that right? Or no, just as is? Because you said
Well,
something
but
to the top of the list.
I'm missing something, but the council ultimately has to vote on the entire ordinance and map, right?
I
right,
understand,
okay.
but I'm just trying to make sure. One of the last things you said before we moved on, that I thought, maybe not you, somebody said, we'll make sure that council something, did I mishear
I
that?
think you were talking about applying more stringent
Oh, you're talking
regulations.
about with the bird. Oh, I see what you're getting at. Thanks for reminding me. All right. So what I said was I would be concerned. So if we take something, we're taking this ordinance to public hearing next Tuesday.
Mhm.
I think whether, obviously the purpose of a public hearing is to get public input. And so if there's issues that have come up that the council deems to be important that require change to the ordinance, if it's changing something to how it was or make something less restrictive, I feel that does not create a new need for a hearing. But if it's introducing new regulations that make it more restrictive, more onerous, if you will.
So less
then-
restrictive, you can move forward, more restrictive, you
Yeah.
have to.
Yeah, I
Is that
mean,
what you're saying?
yeah, but what I'm also a little uncomfortable, so I think I'm comfortable with that as a statement. But I want to acknowledge that there are differing points of view that were expressed just here tonight too. That if somebody might say, well, I support the ordinance because it's more restrictive, and if it's less restrictive, I don't support the ordinance. So, but ultimately it is the council's decision to weigh the public input. As long as the ideas and concepts have been vetted and are there, and there's not new ideas being introduced, I'm comfortable with the council adopting and tweaking if necessary. So, for example, and I'm not suggesting this happen, I'm just saying, for example, if the council said, okay, based on public input, we don't want to make the bird safe language a requirement. We want to keep it as a recommendation as it was previously. I would have no problem with that from a policy, from a legal aspect, because it's just responding to community feedback. But if there's an attempt to make it more restrictive and say, well, let's apply it to an 85-foot height and other circumstances, that would make me uncomfortable, because then the public didn't know that was something that was potentially on deck,
Okay.
on board. So I hope that helps explain
It
things.
did.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that. Thank you. All right, any other clarifying questions, comments? Wonderful.
So this motion that's on the screen
Minus the word new.
specifically
Yeah.
mentions the revisions
Yeah.
to the ordinance and the zoning map since the December 12 meeting. And the only change to the zoning map after that meeting was the
The air.
making it an air
Yeah, which-
district instead of PDD. And we're taking the word new
Right.
out.
Is there a second?
Well, that was Hanira's motion and Erdman Herman's, as long as she agreed with the revisions from what the original motion was,
Yes.
minor amendment.
Thank you. I appreciate that. All
And
those,
this is for, well, wait, my motion was about all three, sign ordinance and outdoor.
I would-
I
Do you
think
want,
you have to do them
I
separately.
would rather, since they're on the agenda separately, let's just do that separately.
Thank you. All right, so on the first one, which is chapter 10, all those in favor of chapter 10?
Chapter 10 being,
The zoning ordinance.
The
Zoning.
ordinance and official zoning map, any changes since December 12th, specifically to support the revisions made to the ordinance and zoning map since the commission's December 12th meeting and to recommend that the common council adopt the new ordinance and map.
Without the word new.
Okay, thank
That's the
you.
motion.
Please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Moving on to number 8, the sign ordinance, also known as chapter 22. I had to find a way to make them different. On the changes since the commission's previous recommendation, for chapter 22, all those, oh, do I have a
And-
motion?
We didn't discuss these, but I did mention the feather signs, and the banner sign was also made one per business or organization. I think that was it for the sign ordinance.
That strikes me as accurate.
Mhm.
Okay.
And so the motion here would simply be made to the ordinance and strike the word and zoning map, obviously.
Okay.
Any reference to the map.
Okay, so I'll move approval, or I'll move that we support the revisions made to the sign ordinance, chapter 22, since the commission's December 12th meeting, and recommend that the common council adopt the ordinance.
Do I have a second?
Adams, a second.
Any comments? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. And moving on to number 9, outdoor lighting ordinance, chapter 33. Do you want to go over them?
I'm looking and see only a few changes.
Page 10.
Mark, do you want to explain the expanding the non-conforming exterior lighting section?
It was basically just to clarify, well, as I said here, to add clarity for how various scenarios, new land uses, new buildings, major additions are handled. It wasn't meant to change any substance per se. But it was restructured a bit.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
The only policy change really was under special uses, number 9. Revised so that this section addresses all commercial land uses, not just vehicle sales and drive-throughs. And then the text that I changed is on the next page.
Is there a motion for chapter 33?
Can we go back to the other screen? This is Hanairo. I'll move that we support the revisions made to outdoor lighting ordinance, chapter 33, since the commission's December 12th meeting, and to recommend that the common council adopt the ordinance.
Is there a second?
Purple second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously. With that, we are adjourned. Have a great night, everyone. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for your good work.